to the global discourse on climate action. Throughout the 2-week conference, the pavilion became a nexus for collaboration, featuring almost 140 international and local speakers, sealing 17 MOUs and partnerships, and unlocking the potential for $9 billion in businesses. All of this was accomplished through a packed schedule of over 60 talks, showcasing the depth of our commitment in just 2 weeks. But the Malaysia Pavilion was more than just a place for us together. It arguably showcased our values. The pavilion was a hub of knowledge, innovation and collaboration, displaying Malaysia's proactiveness in addressing climate change using a whole-of-nation approach. The theme of going beyond green growth, resilient community and sustainable planet reflects our dedication to prioritizing climate action while harmonizing economic growth with protecting our people and the natural environment. The NRES is hence grateful for the support and participation of many important figures, including His Royal Highness the Regent of Pahang, the Governor of Bank Negara, the Executive Director of UN Habitat, our thought leaders such as Tan Sri Dr. Jamila and also Tan Sri Zakri for their strong presence at COP28. Through these dialogues, we demonstrated our ability to facilitate constructive and inclusive conversations on the most pressing issues of our time. Special thanks likewise to all our sponsors and partners for your generous contributions in making the pavilion a resounding success. I extend a heartfelt appreciation to all speakers, partners, members of the advisory panel, the consultative panel, and all stakeholders for your unwavering support and commitment. At the heart of COP's agenda, negotiations addressing critical aspects such as the global stocktake, global goals on adaptation, and other matters of great importance. Our dedicated Malaysian negotiators poured their hearts into safeguarding our national interests at COP28 to have the lens and the views of a developing nation in climate deliberations deserve a heartfelt appreciation and admiration. My only regret is that I did not bring enough batik shirts to COP28. Had I known that the situation at the venue is so warm and hot, then definitely wearing a suit did not make sense. I'm also delighted to extend my gratitude to the Malaysian Aviation Group MAG for your generous support to implement carbon offset and carbon credits for NRES and its agencies. This demonstrates our collective and significant steps towards our commitment of achieving net zero carbon emissions as early as 2050. By embracing carbon offsetting, MAG has demonstrated remarkable leadership in environmental stewardship. And at the level of NRES, we are looking at the possibility of making carbon offsetting as a compulsory criteria going forward for our travelling aspects, and to look at expanding that into the whole of the government. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now look towards the future. As noted, the main outcome from COP28 was the UAE consensus. This included an unprecedented commitment to transitioning away from all fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner in this critical decade. This commitment aligns with the scientific imperative and aims to enable the world to reach net zero emissions by 2050. This, of course, matters a great deal to all countries of the world, including Malaysia. Like it or not, we must prepare and be ready for the transitions that it will invariably spark. We do not want our workers to lose their livelihoods, or for Malaysian companies to be shut out of key export markets, or for the rakyat to face endless cycles, natural disasters, and skyrocketing cost of living due to the failure to adapt to the new global realities. The UAE consensus also gives added urgency to the climate change bill. This piece of legislation will be the means through which we not only address our commitments, but also the overall challenge of climate change. And this is what brings us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, the emergence of the UAE consensus vindicates the current federal government's approaches. We have placed sustainability at the forefront of our national ethos. It is at the core of the Malaysia Madani and the Madani economy frameworks, as well as the National Energy Transition Roadmap, NETR, and the new Industrial Master Plan, NIMP. On a more granular level, NRES has taken proactive steps to initiate key actions that align with our commitment towards a sustainable future. At the forefront of our efforts is formulating the Nationally Determined Contribution Roadmap and the Long-Term Low Emissions Development Strategies, LTLEX, the strategic framework that charts our course towards becoming a net zero nation. Also in the pipeline is the preparation of Malaysia's National Adaptation Plan, awaiting approval from the Green Climate Fund. There's a lot of attention and focus that has been given in mitigation, so at the same time we need to give equal focus to adaptation. Another significant moment in our global efforts to combat climate change is the launch of the post-COP28 report. This report is not a conclusion, but a catalyst for continued action. It provides insights into what has worked, what needs improvement, and where our focus must be sharpened. It is a living document that invites us to learn from our collective experiences and adapt our strategies in the face of evolving environmental threats. I extend my deepest gratitude to all delegates and stakeholders who contributed to the richness of this report and for being part of the drivers towards Malaysia's sustainable future. Meanwhile, the climate change bill which we are drafting will be a robust foundation for our climate action initiatives, providing a legal framework to drive positive change and hold ourselves accountable for our commitments. At its core, the bill is designed to articulate a comprehensive framework that outlines our collective responsibilities, strategies, and actions in mitigating and adapting to the impacts of climate change. It will serve as a roadmap, guiding our nation's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, promote sustainable practices, and bolster resilience in the face of environmental changes. I am eager to gather more views today to support shaping policies that will safeguard our nation, help us to put together the best bill possible. I know that there's been a lot of demand that we should pass this bill faster, but I think what is most important is for us to be able to come up with the most conclusive and comprehensive bill to address our needs. As Minister, I place great importance in sessions like this because I realize that inclusivity is key to successful policy making. We cannot be making these laws in silos anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, this journey transcends governmental initiatives and calls for a collaborative effort involving the private sector, non-state actors, NGOs, vulnerable communities, and our dynamic youth. Our commitment to sustainability also requires a shift in the conversation within the business community. We must encourage companies to perceive decarbonization not merely as a short-term trend or a bureaucratic requirement, not just because of the IRA or because of the CBAM measures, but as a sustained commitment contributing to the greater good beyond profit generation, as well as to ensure business continuity and competitiveness. If there's no planet, there's no business for us to do. To effectively address the complex challenges that lie ahead, we must embrace the cliche whole of society and whole of nation approach. This entails fostering collaboration across diverse sectors, engaging the expertise of various stakeholders, and collectively working towards comprehensive solutions. By uniting our efforts, we can create a resilient and sustainable future that leaves no one behind. In conclusion, now more than ever, the call for urgent action reverberates. Malaysia must maintain our commitment, unwavering commitment, to tackling the challenges ahead, ensuring the valuable momentum gained at COP28 propels our nation forward to deliver positive climate progress. We will have COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, and next year it will be in Brazil. And I think the one in Brazil will provide a lot of opportunities for us to really put Malaysia on the map because of the similarities that we have with Brazil, both having rainforests, both being vocal voices in the climate conversations at the global level. So we have to build up this momentum for COP29 and COP30 and the COPs that will happen in the future. Let us carry the spirit of collaboration forward, catalyzing sustained action for a greener, more resilient, and ultimately sustainable future for ourselves and the generations that follow. Our journey continues. It is within our hands to shape a world that our children will be proud to inherit. Thank you for your commitment, dedication, and participation in this vital endeavor. May our collective efforts pave the way for a brighter and more sustainable tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and please remain on stage as we are about to go to the next agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, we would also like to invite the Deputy Secretary General, Yang Bahagia Datuk Asli bin Muhammad, the Group CEO of MGTC, and Senior Technologist Shamsul Bahar Muhammad Noor, up on stage together with my Minister. To all the media friends, kindly please be on standby in front of the stage, right behind the VIP red seats for the launching of post-COP28 report. Distinguished guests, Malaysia participant at COP28 was led by NRES, previously known as the Ministry of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change (NRECC), which plays a significant role in the national focal point of Malaysia's climate change agenda. With the overarching theme going beyond green growth, resilient community, sustainable planet, it guided Malaysia's collective efforts, emphasizing our dedication to climate action while harmonizing with national priorities. Today we mark another historic event in Malaysia's COP28 journey as we will launch the post-COP28 report to reflect on the momentous occasion in Malaysia's collective journey at COP28. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the physical report of post-COP28, let's give a round of applause to all the delegates that contributed in this journey. Thank you, Minister, Bagirando and Mr. CEO. You are invited to return back to your respective seats. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the main highlights for our participation in COP28 is the Malaysia Pavilion. The Malaysia Pavilion is a collaboration hub that drew delegates from all over the world, fostering partnerships, exchange of ideas, connecting people and resources, and opening ways for climate action in order to achieve the same goal. To talk more on this subject, we would like to invite the Senior Technologist Shamsul Bahar Muhammad Noor, the Group CEO of Malaysia Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation, to present the outcome on Malaysia Pavilion. The floor is yours, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the post-COP 28 report. I'll be presenting the highlights of what we achieved and what needs to be done. We welcome the partners, the advisory panel. I believe that most of you have made your way to Dubai and coming back, so we made it with a consensus to ensure that we walk the talk. Even though Malaysia only contributes less than 0.7% of the carbon emitted out, but again, our commitment shows with the huge delegation that we brought forward to Dubai. This was the largest ever COP organized by any country. We had 156 head of states with more than 100,000 of delegates. This is delegates, this is not visitors. They've calculated the visitors to be amounting to almost 500,000. From 133 parties. Why only 133, whereby there are 198 countries around the world? Because EU represent one party, and with 226 pavilions. Our Yang Pertuan head the delegation with the rest of the other head of states, and it was such a strong statement coming from the UN SecGen. We cannot save a burning planet with fire hose of fossil fuel. We have to stop fossil fuel, period. So that is the statement. So the consensus by UAE is that, or at COP, was transitioning from fossil fuel. There were a few highlights, a few takeaways from the COP. We just take this one. And most notably, our YPM negotiated for the loss and damage fund, so that will be the beneficiary of it as well. So I think this is a huge effort that whatever climate change has changed the landscape of Malaysia, we need to build and rebuild. We had two solid week sessions at COP with the launch of the Malaysia Pavilion on the 1st of December by Yang Pertuan then. And we had solid daily events whereby we had conferences, we had dialogues, we had negotiation, conversation. So most of it leads to the climate conversation. And the theme that we are looking at is going beyond green growth, going beyond resilient community and sustainable planet. So we have lined up so many speakers from all over, not just from Malaysia alone, with the understanding that it is a whole nation approach that we need to deliver. Not only was the largest COP that was being held, it was also the largest delegate that we pulled in. More than 700 delegates, comprised from industry, from government. We had 138 panel speakers from both local and international, and here are the numbers, 17 MOUs. Initially, COP was always about intergovernmental dialogues, negotiation, but we add in something a bit different this time around. We had a lot of trade talks, bilateral understanding, amounting to $9 billion. So this is a tremendous success of what can be achieved and what should be achieved. The media coverage is huge, amounting to more than 14 million PR value. So this is something that we need to have more awareness program so that the whole of Malaysia, as well as the global community, understood well what Malaysia intends and decided to push ahead. Thank you very much to all partners. I believe give yourself a clap that we managed to bring so many industrial players, the partners, the sponsors from civil societies. This is, again, that's why we mentioned whole nation approach. We need more of this. We hope that in Baku, Azerbaijan, as well as in Brazil, it's not only a single slide, but we cram with so many of the partners that we could bring along. Now, so the ranges of discussion that we had, the forum, the forum, the seminar, the conferences, the dialogues, it goes from the government to the private sector, to the civil society, and as well as doing announcement on what is next. What is next in the Malaysian agenda to ensure that climate change needs to be mitigated, there needs to be climate action and adaptation, as well as loss and damage that needs to be rebuilt in Malaysia. So our work, our conversation have we heard. So hopefully that in years to come, in all other COP, we can become a driving force to push this through. Being the 17th highest, usually the delegates are just comprised of government officials, but now we extended them. So we have the party overflow amounting to more than 500, And the government is actually is about 200 of the government officials as well as agencies. If you break it down, the number of visitations that we had at our pavilion, it goes beyond 3,000. We've countries coming from America, from UK, from Canada, from all over, especially from ASEAN countries, because there needs to be a collective effort in combating climate change. This is very important. Look at the numbers of the viewership. We had 300 million viewers, and putting a small dot to grow it as big as we could in terms of awareness program that we are driving from Malaysia, and the 17 million PR value is huge. So this is not only daily, it is by the hour, by the minute that we are blasting at all of the media coverage throughout the whole 2 weeks program. Our Yang Agung is a very passionate person in terms of climate change. So the statement that he made, addressing emissions from the energy and industrial sector is the focus of Malaysia's climate action, as it accounts for the majority of Malaysia's total climate emission. Thank you very much to Yang Agung for being there, for giving a huge statement coming from the head of state of Malaysia, as well as the region of Pahang. He stayed on for the whole 2 weeks in Dubai, attending a lot of conferences that we held, as well as conferences from all other pavilions. Let's unite together and let's put Malaysia back on the map and become a great champion in the world today. So this is something that not only coming from them, but also coming from us, that we need to push them through. Now, before I end, this is the most important aspect of the whole COP that we went. We need to walk the COP. We have calculated the travelling, the carbon footprint from Malaysia, travelling all the way to Dubai, all the organizing all the events, and coming back to Malaysia. The amount of carbon that we release, greenhouse gas, is 128 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, coming from the Ministry and NRES as well as 9 agencies. Now, what we advise is that for all events, for all sort of travelling that we are embarking upon, we need to calculate carbon emission. And what do? We offset. The amount is 128 tons of carbon dioxide, equivalent to 3,200 trees. Now, it is not that difficult to plant trees, but you take an effort. So what we have done, we do carbon offsetting. And thank you very much again to MAG. Let's give them a clap for taking on all the costs of the travelling that we have done. We will to take the whole amount of carbon that we emitted out. It is about 700 tons. So we hope that the rest of you guys here would actually pick this up, offset. Either you plant trees or you purchase carbon credit. This year will be at Baku, Azerbaijan. So do scan and show your interest that you'll be participating, and together with us, the government in delivering a huge voice that we could showcase again. Maybe no longer 700 of delegates, maybe 1,000 delegates to bring over. And before I end, thank you very much again. We'd like to show a video. Actually, we decided to show it at the end of my presentation, my dry slides. The slides will be featuring our YBM. He's a good director. So telling us what actually took place during the 2 weeks of COP, and thanking all for participating. Thank you very much.
Saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada semua pihak yang telah menjayakan Pavilion Malaysia di persidangan COP ke-28 di Dubai, Emirat Arab Bersatu. Antara rakan kongsi yang telah menjayakan Pavilion Malaysia termasuklah tenaga nasional, UEM, PNB, Cita Global, Suruhanjaya Security, Capital Markets Malaysia, Pembangunan, Maybank, CIMB, MRCB, Oval, Cloth, Tetra Pak, Decathlon dan juga BCG. Dan pada masa yang sama, kita telah lihat bagaimana menerusi Pavilion Malaysia ini, kehadiran negara telah dapat dirasai. Kita ada kehadiran dan rakyat Malaysia secara keseluruhan dianggarkan dalam 600 orang, dan ini termasuklah mewakili pihak kerajaan, pihak swasta, badan bukan kerajaan, agensi-agensi, anak-anak muda, kaum orang asal dan orang asli dan sebagainya. Dan kita juga menerima kehadiran lebih 2,500 orang setakat 8 Disember 2023, dan ini terdiri daripada kehadiran daripada lebih 45 negara, termasuklah negara-negara seperti Singapura, India, Amerika Syarikat, Emirat Arab Bersatu, Brunei, Brazil, Turki, Nigeria, Maghribi, Filipina dan sebagainya. Dan ada berbagai panel yang membincangkan isu-isu seperti biodiversity, seperti isu air, peralihan tenaga, kewangan iklim, dan lain-lain lagi topik yang mendapat perhatian yang meluas. Jadi kita telah, bagi saya, alhamdulillah kehadiran ataupun adanya Pavilion Malaysia dalam COP28 ini sangat positif, dan kita berharap ini akan memberi satu lonjakan, satu persediaan yang positif untuk kita menuju ke COP29 pada tahun 2024 nanti. Dan lebih penting lagi, memastikan suara dan pandangan Malaysia mendapat perhatian dunia dalam sebarang perbincangan dan juga persidangan tentang perubahan iklim yang sangat penting untuk kita semua.
We will see you again in Azerbaijan, hopefully in COP29. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's give a round of applause again. Congratulations to all the contributors to the Malaysia Pavilion COP28. Ladies and gentlemen, the essence of COP meetings is primarily revolved around negotiations and debates. The aim is to review progress towards the overall goal of the UNFCCC to limit climate change. Negotiations at COP28 concluded with the UAE consensus. With that conclusion, there is a strong sense that progress towards decarbonization is indeed happening. But to have a chance of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, more ambition is needed, as well as a focus on converting pledges to a measurable action. Ladies and gentlemen, to explain more on this matter from Malaysian perspective, I would like to invite Mr. Ahmad the Deputy Under-Secretary of Climate Change Division of NRES, to present on COP28 negotiations outcome. Please welcome Mr. Ahmad.
Thank you, Ms. Asli. Baby Nazmi Ahmad, Minister of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Razali bin Muhammad, Deputy Secretary General NRES, Encik Samso, CEO MPTC, Encik Rahimi, Chairman of MPTC, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. COP28 just ended almost 2 months. I think it's still not too late for us to organize the briefing session today to discuss the main outcome and the way forward for Malaysia. Just now, it's also just mentioning about the overall what happening in COP28, where it's one of the biggest conference ever being had recently. So it attended about more than 100,000 people. It seems that many people are very concerned about climate change. So today I will present the main outcome as a scene setting before we start the panel discussion today. So for your information, Malaysian delegation involved in the climate change negotiation process in COP28 held in UAE from 31st of November until 12th of December 2023. Apart from the NRES delegation, there are also negotiations representing from various ministries, namely Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health,
Ministry of Human Resource, Ministry of Plantation and Commodities, Ministry of Agriculture, Attorney General Office, and also Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So the delegation met every other day in coordination meetings to drive out issues aroused in the negotiation sessions. The thematic agenda of the negotiation are mostly about the global stocktake, mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, the transition, current finance abuse. So the long-awaited tax decision on global stocktake came out on the 13 days of December, which is one day late after the closing official. Okay. Okay, I'll start cover on the global stocktake. So 2023 is very important for GST to take place. It's been done every 5 years. Next will be in 2028. So basically, GST is to gauge the effect of party, what we have done throughout the years, what we have done when we submitted the NDC, the LTLF, National Action Plan, and other activities. The world are facing unprecedented challenges. The speed of climate change is faster than the climate action. So this context, parties are not yet collectively on track to make the Paris Agreement goal. In order to keep 1.5 degree goal within which parties need to accelerate action based on science and principle of equity, common but differentiated responsibilities as practiced by ECDRC, mitigation and adaptation finance, and support are insufficient and need to increase many-fold. So for mitigation, GST introduced the specific mitigation target, and the famous one is the transition away from the fossil fuel. This is the first time ever being introduced in COP, in energy system, phase down unabated coal power plant, phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, roll on low carbon fuels such as hydrogen, communicate ambitious economy-wide NDC until that's in 2025. For adaptation, parties agreed to establish the UAE framework for global climate resilience, and then for the damage, agree on authorization of the loss and damage fund, and also the Santiago network on the loss and damage. And then for just transition, parties agreed to establish the UAE just transition program. And this on international cooperation to embrace multilateralism, enhancing international cooperation, which is synergized action with other MBA, establishing an ambition of 5 to enhance cooperation ambitions. Okay, for mitigation, party continue the enhanced shared dialogue on mitigation ambition and implementation work program. Country need to suggest topic on the global dialogue in 2024, mainly on just energy transition and low carbon transport. We discuss in 2023. So that we will discuss more topic. We just got an email from the NRES that suggests what the topic to be discussed, and also to organize 2 global dialogue and investment focus events in 2024. And then for adaptation, party agreed to establish UAE framework for global climate resilience, where to introduce a specific adaptation target by 2030. So this includes water, agriculture, health, biodiversity, infrastructure. So this is basically in line with our proposed net focus area. And then also decided to launch the 2 years UAE Thailand book program on measuring progress achieved toward the adaptation target. Thailand is the host country for the COP30, going to be held in Brazil. Okay, for loss and damage, in Sharm el-Sheikh, party agreed for new arrangement for fund, or loss and damage fund. During the first day of opening of COP28, so UAE has nearly, where host country has now 100 million of contribution to this fund, which this is a record history for the COP. Normally, based on my little experience that I attended, when one fund to be set up, it's quite difficult for any fund to have the money. But UAE has shown the leadership by putting 100 million, and then it triggered the other country to contribute as well. So on that day, there are 792 million funding has been pledged by the country, including UAE. And this fund has been agreed for World Bank to operationalize the fund and hosted the financial intermediary fund for entry for 4 years. And World Bank also is to serve as interim secretary for the fund before the establishment of the permanent secretary. We know that to establish a permanent secretary is always taking a little time, also sometimes quite a long time. So the fund will become one of the financial mechanisms under the UNFCCC, just like other mechanisms that GCF or Tertiary Fund also get. And then country also need to nominate the representative for membership and alternate membership of the board of the fund. The setup will be similar like GCF. In terms of just transition, party also agree for UAE just transition work program. The work program includes several elements: the goal of the Paris Agreement, just an equitable transition, and the socio-economic workforce, enhancing adaptation and climate resilience, creation of decent work and quality job, inclusive approach and international cooperation, and another dialogue also will be comment here as part of it. And then for climate finance is important to assist different countries to mitigate to the adverse impact of climate change and to meet the obligation economic under the sea. So loss and damage fund is partly under climate finance as well. The party also agreed to establish understanding of the definition of climate finance and also to start to negotiate the scale of element new collective quantified goal on climate finance or NCQG in 2024. Party also agreed to continue discussion on sharp election dialogue on the scope of Article 2, Paragraph 1, bracket C, or formerly known as 21C of the Paris Agreement on climate change is complementary with Article 9 of the Paris Agreement, making finance more consistent with pathway toward low GHG emission and climate resilience development related to foreign investment in economic cooperation. Okay, for use. Party also agreed to enhance the official use in the climate process under the PRC and Paris Agreement. Malaysia should let that we also sent quite numbers of youth participation to that event. Even we also have organized the COP28 session last week, where the minister himself will officiate the event. So this one of the effort that they did is to establish the role of Presidency Youth Climate Champion (YCC) at the permanent position within UNFCCC, and also future presidency of COP will appoint a youth climate champion within the age of 18 and 25. Maybe there are some of the youth members here could be nominated or could be suited for this post. Who knows that Malaysian representative will become this post? Okay, this is the way forward, where for participation, we need to continue active participating in the climate change process under the Diversity and Paris Agreement. We need to put our red line or whatever position that we have for make sure that our position is certain. And then for policy implication, we need to study the UAE consensus and relevant COP28 decision. For example, the implementation of the proposed mitigation target under implementation, and also to continue to develop and implement climate-related policy that will include Malaysian long-term climate target and also net zero emission. And for capacity building, we need to continue building and also enhancing capacity of the project in Malaysia on climate change and COP outcome. And then for support, we need to seek and obtain relevant support to implement climate action through multilateral and bilateral processes, especially the WTC, ASEAN, International Organization, Trade Agreement, Economic Network. And for information, currently Malaysia is the chair for ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change. So, if anyone wants to have any cooperation with ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change, you can meet us here or in the office, so we can discuss further on the collaboration that anyone wants to cooperate. And then for synergy, enhance synergy and cooperation on climate change with other multilateral environmental agreement, MBA. We should link with the others MBA, like Multiple Biodiversity Framework, and also LANGSUNG. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Farid. Ladies set for our next engaging dialogue, I encourage you to consider the positive outcomes and milestones achieved during COP28. It's very inspiring to see how the international community is coming together to address climate change, biodiversity loss, and other environmental issues. Perhaps let's take this moment to connect with fellow attendees, share your thoughts on the conference, or even exchange ideas on how we can continue to make a positive impact in our respective communities. The passion and dedication in this room are the driving forces that will shape the future we all aspire to achieve. And thank you once again for your understanding, and let's carry this momentum forward as we delve into the upcoming discussion. Let's stay tuned for more insightful conversations and collaborative efforts in our ongoing journey towards a sustainable and resilient world. Thank you very much, Secretary Tim. Ladies and gentlemen, our next agenda on the list is the panel session. The panel session will delve into the outcome of COP28, highlighting the opportunities and challenges for Malaysia in its climate journey. We anticipate an engaging discussion drawing from diverse perspectives, particularly from government, industry, and NGOs. To moderate the session, I would like to invite our moderator, Ibu Bahagia Dr. Sri Sunita Rajkumar, Chairperson of Climate Change Governance, to the stage. Let me share a little bit about Dr. Sri Sunita. Dr. Sri Sunita is a professional independent director and a strong advocate on the importance of governance in general and risk management in particular. She held several important positions in various well-known corporations, such as the Dutch Lady Milk Industry Berhad, Petronas Chemicals Group Berhad, HSBC Bank Malaysia Berhad, MCRS Insurance Berhad, a member of the Sanlam Group, and Zurich General Insurance Malaysia Berhad, as well as the trustee of 6 charitable foundations. She is also a chairman and a founder of Climate Governance Malaysia, the country chapter of the World Economic Forum's Climate Governance Initiative, and many other prominent organizations. Welcome, Ibu. And joining her on stage is Yang Muhammad Attorney Nazmi Ahmad, Minister of NRES. Wabidi Nazmi then attended College Yayasan UEM for his A-levels in 2002. He furthered his studies to King's College London, where he studied law. He is the Member of Parliament for Setiawangsa and the current Vice President. He was also appointed as the Chairman of Badan Perpustakaan Awam Selangor, Chairman of the Board of Governors for University Selangor, as well as a member of the Board of Directors for UNICEF, Selangor, and Institute Darul Ihsan. He has served several parliamentary special select committees, member of Budget 2018 to 2019, Chair of Defence and Home Affairs, and members of Education. For the next panelist, Ms. Charlotte Mubal, Chief Sustainability Officer from Petronas. Please be invited. Talking about Ms. Charlotte, she is an award-winning business leader at the forefront of the sustainability movement. Since joining Petronas in 2021, she has turned the company's net zero carbon emission aspiration into strategy and plan to drive decarbonization and social progress. And last but not least, let's invite Ms. Meenakshi Raman, Senior Advisor of Third World Network. Ms. Meenakshi is currently Head of Programs of the Third World Network, which is an independent non-profit international research and advocacy organization involved in issues relating to sustainable development, environment and climate change, developing countries and North-South affairs. She has a wide knowledge on climate change negotiations, having attended around 16 talks, and has authored a book published by TWN entitled The Clash of Climate Change Paradigms. Let us give a warm welcome to our moderator and panelists. Brother Bismillah, I'll hand over the session to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much to NRES for having us all here, and especially I'm looking forward to questions from the floor later. Very grateful for this opportunity to be able to moderate a panel session, not just with YB Menteri, but also two well-known COP veterans. Can everyone see me? Mina was worried that I went into the sofa. So we have a 10-month runway to COP29 in Baku and also 2 years COP30 in Brazil. We know that the next 2 years are going to be critical. And by COP29, governments must establish a new climate finance goal reflecting the scale and urgency of the climate challenge. And by COP30, they must come prepared with new NDCs that are economy-wide, cover all greenhouse gases, and are fully aligned with the 1.5 degree temperature limit. I'd like to invite the panelists to comment, and then we'll invite the minister's views on the panelists' comments. Okay, over to you, Mina.
Good morning, Honourable Minister. I only have 3 minutes, so I'm not going to say number behind here and cut short of the time. So allow me to go straight to the point. Yes, I have been to 16 COPs, and of course this COP has been quite significant. And thank you to NRES and Farid just now for presenting what made my task much easier. Now everybody was congratulating the Emiratis for pulling off the fossil fuel transition. Of course, I think the big news in the mainstream media was, is it really a transition, or is it why they did not use the term phase out, but rather transitioning away? And for us, I think it's really a matter of semantics, and I think the real message was actually you've got to move away from fossil fuels. Now, there are a lot of challenges there. The biggest challenge, of course, is that if you look at the famous paragraph 28 of that, which was making fossil fuel transitions, transitioning away from fossil fuels. If you look at the paragraph in terms of introduction, it does talk about all parties having to do this within their national circumstances. And then it talks about just, equitable, and orderly transition for all the mitigation efforts. Now, how do you do that in a real way? Because at the end of the day, if every country is supposed to do this according to their own national circumstances and own nationally determined manner, how do you actually lead to a global target that will be realized? So how do you ensure just, equitable, and orderly transition? This question has not been answered. And in fact, for many of us, all that applause that was happening was actually very concerning, because the devil is actually in the details and complexity of the subject. In order to limit the 1.5 temperature rise, now that's the IPCC, as many of you may know, has said that what's available and what is left at the moment is 500 gigatons of carbon space left, for a 50% chance of limiting temperature rise to 1.5. So it's only 50% chance. And the Global Stocktake decision acknowledged that 4/5 of the carbon space has been overused. But what they did not say is who has overused this space. And so for many of us, and even some governments, we're talking about equity and common but differentiated responsibility, taking into account the historical and cumulative emissions. So if you take that into account, there is no space for the developed world to continue to occupy and use the remaining carbon space. So if you talk about a just and equitable transitioning away, what was really problematic was that behind that announcement, in real terms, according to various reports, including by Oil Change International, while everybody was applauding in Dubai, the actual licenses and approvals of permits for fossil fuel expansion and production in 10 of the top emitters of the world, in the developed world, it takes the, then in terms of expansion up to 2050 already. So while the applause was happening, permits and production, licenses were being given, including the famous Biden, IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. The critique of that was actually, although President Biden was actually doing much more than the previous Trump presidency, and by the way, we're probably going to see a new Trump. And then God knows what that means when you have a climate denialist historical emitter who doesn't acknowledge climate change. What you actually see is that the Inflation Reduction Act is actually locking in fossil fuel expansion. So I think what we need to realize is that while the big news and applause was out there, in terms of the details and the reality on the ground, it was something else. So I have a lot more to say, but I do want to say that we have to look at it with our eyes open, and how do you enable a just, equitable, and orderly transition in a way that actually ensures that developing countries will not have to absorb the burden. Because there is no space for carbon offsets. We all were clapping about carbon offset, and they talk more about that. If the more that we sell our carbon credits, the less that is available to us to use for our own actions here in this country. So the more things you give the foreigners, the less you have for yourself. So they have very, very deep challenges, and of course the most important thing is it's the means of implementation that will enable the transformation. This is not a climate agreement per se, it's an economic transformation agreement which requires fundamental changes that the developed countries are not making fast enough.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mina. And I hope
First of all, thank you very much for inviting Petronas for me to be here today. And I really want to start by thanking you, Honourable Minister Nazmi, for such an amazing hub that you created in Dubai, and also to MGTC and the staff of the ministry, because this was remarkable. To sit there between China and the US, I think it was, and Indonesia, and it didn't take a day or two, and we became like a magnet for international discourse, very focused conversations, bilaterals, and really the full factor was tremendous. Always standing room only, and also the speakers from around the world really talking about Malaysia and how Malaysia was putting some important topics to the fore. So I just want to congratulate you, Honourable Minister, and all the staff at MGTC, because that was a tremendous effort. I'm so proud to have been part of that delegation, and also Petronas to be part of the group. Now, it's going to be an interesting debate. We probably don't have enough time, but I would say that I also want to congratulate the hosts, the UAE. They promised an inclusive COP. It was the most inclusive ever, as we heard before, 100,000 delegates. This really matters because, in my view, might be a little bit different from Nina's view, but the Paris Agreement sets very clearly where we need to go to. It's very clear, it's our North Star that we need to reach. What was so remarkable in Dubai is that we had a real economy meeting governments, but also youth, NGOs, grassroots movements, all coming together with a common goal around climate mitigation, adaptation, climate finance, just transition, and so on. And also it was very good, I thought, for the first time, that we saw not quite a convergence of the two UN conventions on biodiversity, ecological biodiversity and climate change, but it was definitely much more nature and biodiversity sort of events, and hopefully we can those topics will combine into systems thinking going forward. But well done, UAE, I must also say, because now it is a whole of society approach, a whole global society approach going forward. So then people do need to be in the tent. Excluding anybody does not help. Now, from Petrol's perspective, it was also a very momentous COP. So we signed up to something called the Oil and Gas Decarbonisation Charter. This is a charter that's very much in line with our net zero carbon emission by 2050 pathway that we launched a couple of years ago. But what's so important here is that over 50 national and international oil and gas companies signed up to this charter, which commits us all to have 20 net zero carbon emission plans for 2050, near-term targets by 2030, but also driving for near zero methane emissions, and also to have a measurement, reporting, and verification of our emissions. Why does this matter? This constitutes over 40% of the oil and gas produced in the world. So what's happening through this charter is that the whole of the industry is now embracing these climate ambitions. This is essential. You can't just have Petronas and perhaps Shell and a few others out there doing this. We need the whole of the industry really to become climate fluent, emissions fluent, and really address the issue at hand. So to me, COP28 was like none before, and Baku will have big shoes to fill, I would say.
Thank you so much. Worthy Minister, do you have any thoughts that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, thank you. First, I have to say that for the organizers, it's good that for once it's not a panel, an all-male panel, right? I'm the only male here today on this panel, so that's something that's progressive. I think, when the issue has always been when we talk about climate finance, there's that promise for so long of 100 billion that's been bandied out. 100 billion US dollars a year to help for loss and damage and all that. And we know that we've seen the numbers, what's there in the account, 700 billion already in the account. There are pledges and all that, but it doesn't add up to what has been promised for so long. And I think the way for Malaysia as a developing country, the way we look at it, we're like a kid. Our parents have been promising us to get a PS5 every time we score well in an exam. And we have kept scoring well in exams, but we keep getting cheap toys instead. Right? So, we don't get the promised expensive one that we want. So, what choice do we have? The choice, if I were advising that kid, is to say that you still have to study anyway and score. Within what, even without getting what was promised to you, you still have to get results. So for us, we will do what we can, within our means to achieve our net zero goals, because we have no choice. It is an existential issue. The government, the fiscal space is very limited. I mean, we all know that. Right? Last year, the Prime Minister had to give special attention to school toilets because of the limitation in the fiscal space. We can then draw in private financing or blended financing. We can utilize, in the budget we are talking about a 1 billion sukuk for biodiversity, wakaf. Indonesia is using wakaf or Islamic endowments for forests. I think Turkey is doing the same thing. We can all explore that, and I think we need to be more creative in order to get as much money to fight climate change as possible. Because if we don't, we won't be able to have the required amount. I mean, when last year when we were talking about, I think the number for Malaysia is in the trillions for us to achieve that goal. Energy transition alone will be about 640 billion ringgit until 2050. Right? So that's why we will have to be very creative. We have to manage it very well. I think the good thing in Malaysia, not to say good thing, is that we still have space in the sense that we are in the process. We started with electricity to start the process of reducing our fossil fuel subsidies, because these are blanket subsidies that's not helpful to anyone. I mean, other than obviously, it's the rich that are benefiting more. from cheaper fuels or cheaper electricity rather than coal. So the government has started on that. That will free up some space, but it will mean that we still will require more money to address this. So I think when you talk about the journey towards what's necessary for climate finance that we want to achieve for going forward, not just COP29, COP30, but all the way to 2050, we will do all that, but we will keep on fighting. And I think that's where, to me, Brazil is very strategic. I can say, I told the Prime Minister, yes, last year you were not able to make it. This year, Baku, I don't really mind if you can't go, but I think next year, because with President Lula being there, I think he and our Prime Minister will make a very good partnership in order to voice out what the developing world needs in order for us to make that transition. We still have to beg the table for that, because as Mina said, until and unless that is addressed, then maybe Malaysia can sort of find our way out of it. But there are many other countries, even the definition of least developed countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Libya, which are suffering from calamities, they cannot address that because they cannot tap into those funds. So I think that is where we will keep begging on to ask for those things to be addressed.
Thank you so much, Minister. So we're going to have 2 rounds of questions, and then I'll invite questions from the floor. But the first round is really on increasing aspirations. So we know that 2023 was the warmest year on record by a large margin, with 6 international data sets recording that we're already above the 4.5 degrees of warming. So it's very clear that we're going to overshoot, but if to keep 1.5 degrees of warming alive, we're going to need to be even more ambitious in our mitigation. We also already saw in 2023 extreme weather events, extreme heat impacting health, fueling devastating wildfires, intense rainfall, flooding, and so on and so forth, with huge economic losses, leaving a trail of destruction and death. How can we as a country, despite the challenges that we're facing, for example, climate finance, how can we demonstrate thought leadership that can result in outsized impacts and outcomes? How can we provide thought leadership, for example, for the G77 nations? How can we galvanize Islamic finance to support the transition needed? Could we provide access to better data, democratize access to data, so that we can have better informed decision making? So again, we can start with Nina and Charlotte and Minister to respond.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I will come back to the fundamental equity principle, because I do think that any foundation in terms of delivering on the real goals will require global effort on the basis of equity and common but differentiated responsibility. Many people don't understand why many of us articulate that. I think, Minister, thank you for picking up that and how important Brazil is. Because the other target that was not mentioned was actually in the GSP decision on deforestation, where you have to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. Now, I acknowledge the fact that it's very important for us to do what we can do, but I think the point here is that everybody has to do what they have to do. But in terms of the real ambition, in terms of increasing and the aspiration for more ambition, there is such a thing of conditional ambition. There's only so much we can do with domestic resources. Minister, thank you for highlighting that about 640 billion ringgit needed for the energy transition by 2050, I think. But that's, I hear there's also another number of 682 billion. Not sure about the real numbers. But that's only the energy transition. You talked about the loss and damage, talked about adaptation. If we factor in these numbers, it's really much, much more than that. And this is why I acknowledge the fact that in terms of leadership, the leadership of this country in terms of what we can do domestically, but what we really can do internationally for speaking up for the developing world. I think that's absolutely critical. Now, in any outcome that we have gotten so far, it's been with a lot of fight. And the other aspect that I need to also say, the famous paragraph 28 that we all signed for the transitioning away, there are some problems there. If you look at paragraph 29 of the Global Stocktake decision, it allows for natural gas as a transition fuel. Now, many of the small island states are saying this is a loophole because natural gas itself is fossil fuel. So how can that be part of your transition? Now, I know that Petronas and others, many of the oil majors, and I'd like to say here that many of us in civil society, while we take on the big oil majors, we make a difference between national oil companies who are contributing to the national budget, like Petronas is, compared to the Exxon and the Totals and all the others, whose shareholders are the private shareholders. They have nothing to do with developing it. I mean, they don't have any social conscience at all. So the point that I'm making is that while we think that the oil and gas sector is where we need to focus attention, but it's not enough just to put everybody in the same basket, because if Petronas is not going to, and maybe this is my question to you, Charlotte, Petronas contributes 20 to 30% to the national budget. What are you going to do in order to plug that? And I know that you're relying on LNG as well. The other problem that we have is also with the kind of technologies that are being promoted. Again, many of us in civil society are absolutely concerned about the carbon capture and storage and CCS and CCUS, about nuclear. I know this is going to be a long battle. And then about the critical minerals, the whole rare earth controversy. And many of these, ministers, we know many of us are so worried that these critical minerals that are essential are located in the environmentally sensitive areas, where you have to make sure you protect the forest and conserve the forest. At the same time, you want to mine for the clean energy transition. It's just mind-boggling. The challenge is quite enormous. And the final point I want to make about the net zero. Now, the Paris Agreement talks about a global net zero. I said this before. It's a global net zero where you decarbonize and you increase the sinks. And so you have a global net zero. But then when we went to Glasgow, every country was supposed to go net zero. Now, we all can't be carbon offsetting. If you take the net zero pledges in the NDCs of countries, what we actually find is that there was a report done, it's called the Land Gap Report. If you look at that, the amount of carbon sequestration that's needed from the carbon sinks would require 4 times the land size of India. Now, where are we going to go for that? Where do we have that? So if everybody is going to say, I'm going to fly and I'm going to offset, I'm going to plant a tree, first, the science doesn't work that way. You're talking about fossil fuel emissions. You can't be offsetting that simply overnight by planting a tree. So I'm sorry, I am touching some sensitive stuff, but that's my job as civil society as well, while we talk about equity. But at the same time, I think you need to acknowledge that offsetting is not the way out. It's actually postponing real action from happening. So we need to decarbonize, we need to increase the sinks, and the enabler for that, and this is my final point, is the finance. I just want to tell you one little story that really struck me when I was in Dubai. This was the new Minister of Environment from Colombia. And she said it very bluntly. She said, we actually need a new kind of arrangement, new economic order, new financial system. Because her president, President Petro, when he came into power, he announced, Colombia is going to move away. We are no more going to rely on coal, we are no more going to rely on oil. Guess what happened? The peso plunged. The credit rating agencies downgraded Colombia. They got into debt. How the hell are you going to be ambitious? Yeah. So you need a new system. Just doesn't rely on the current financial architecture that downgrades those countries who actually want to do the right thing. And so this is the kind of enabling environment that's needed that really allows the true ambition. And without getting the North off the hook, while we have domestic resources, we have to also go for the northern resources because that's what the obligation is. And at the same time, there is money, the special drawing rights. 650 billion was mobilized during the COVID and the post-economic crisis when they were all going through. 650 billion of IMF reserve currency, overnight mobilized, which they couldn't use. And they can rechannel that, and many Prime Minister of Barbados and others have been talking about this. So there is money, it's not about no money, and this is what we in civil society, while we encourage Malaysia to do as much as we can, we fight internationally for more resources so that we too can have access to these resources.
Thank you so much. So more coordination on the regional, the international front. What are your thoughts?
I think Hannah just demonstrated how important it is to have cross-sectoral engagement like government, private sector, civil society, so well, and again to the organizers. So you mentioned that in about climate change, and it's absolutely real, and we saw in last month's World Economic Forum Global Risk Report, climate change and extreme weather events, again the second highest risk, again on that list. It is absolutely real, and it's clear that we must decarbonize the existing energy system whilst we're building the next generation of energy. We also know that we can't switch overnight. So in a way, it's also important to understand we need to address all levers. We can't just, there's no silver bullet here. We need to try to decarbonize as fast as we can and also invest in new technology. Not all technology exists today to sort of bring the energy that will support the important social progress and economic progress that's required for this region. Now, you were asking about leadership and thought leadership. And here I want to share something which has been regarded as leading. So about just over 2 years ago, before COP26, Petronas started an initiative with the support of PTT of Thailand, which is the ASEAN Energy Sector Methane Roundtable. This is a roundtable for national oil companies in ASEAN. We have many partners to it. There are the World Bank, International Energy Agency, United Nations Environment Program, to mention a few, also Environmental Defense Fund, and so on. This roundtable has been now running for over 2 years, as I mentioned, and it really is, the focus is to share knowledge and help these national oil and gas companies to drive down methane emissions, which obviously methane is a potent greenhouse gas, and that we must really bring down immediately. Sort of a culmination of this work was last June. We launched the Methane Leadership Program, and this was supported generously by USAID, and also we had support from JOGMEC in Japan to sponsor some methane mitigation projects here in Malaysia. And this program that we helped set up is basically has workshops and master classes, bringing together over 100 practitioners regularly for week-long events to learn how do you drive down methane emissions in real terms. So these are people who actually do it. I wanted to mention this because this is a real action. It's demonstrating results across the whole region. The region is not standing still. Back to the minister's point, we are doing our bit. It's sort of been going so well, so we've even been asked from other countries, can we also join? So now we have Australians involved, Americans, and so on, and Japanese. And I must also share that we've been doing this, it's going really well. There's a lot of participation, more and more people join these workshops. Just before year end, I picked up a report from CSIS, which is the Center for Strategic International Studies. It's a bipartisan think tank in Washington, D.C. And they highlighted Petronas to be a leading national oil company in the world when it comes to methane emission mitigation, and also for our advocacy in the industry to drive down these emissions. That was a proud moment, but back to your point, Martin, about leadership, and can Malaysia sort of punch above its weight? So I think on methane emissions management, that's something that we're doing quite well.
Congratulations, Sharon. And Minister, we've quite a few suggestions. What are your thoughts in the next 1 to 2 years? How can we increase our climate aspirations?
Just allow me for 10 seconds to address what Rina mentioned just now. I think I understand the concern, for example, of things like critical minerals, or what we call here rare earths. But that is why currently we are only allowing the exploitation of that outside forest reserves, and in spite of calls to do it within forest reserves, we are reserving that with by doing a stringent study on areas which were previously forested. It's still forested physically, but it has been taken up prior to many years back. taken out of the forest reserve in order to see what's the real impact on the ground of mining practices, rare earth mining over there, right? And we know that technically it is possible, but the crucial issue for a country like Malaysia is enforcement in order for that to happen. And for me as well, when you talk about things like offsetting or the various measures, CCUS and everything, I agree that there has to be caution there, and it cannot be the ultimate solution when we want to overcome our problems. But we have to explore all possible angles with regards to that. So I think we cannot totally discard those things. I mean, for example, we still need to travel until the electric plane or the hydrogen plane is ready. Offsetting is one of the ways we can do that. But in order to be more ambitious, I think over the next few years, we will see that definitely. One is that, for sure, once we have, we are already seeing, we are already seeing the work that we are doing with regards to the climate change bill. So once the climate change bill is there, once it becomes an act, then we will see that a lot of these pledges that we have internationally and whatnot will, or it is being encompassed in broad policies like low carbon policies or NEDR and so on and so forth, will actually be captured by the climate change legislation, and that will be legally binding. So that will allow us to actually be more ambitious to achieve our climate goals. But I have to say, what was mentioned just now is that we have the elephant in the room is the financial system. As long as the financial system is, what do you call that, the one that we have today that look merely at short-term profits, that merely look at what value we can give to the shareholders, then that is a challenge for us. I think to the credit of Bank Negara, to the Securities Commission, they've done work with the JCCC, for example. Bursa has also done a lot of, I think, very exemplary work to bring our companies to think on a different level, to bring our banks to think on a different level. And I think a lot of banks are, to their credit, from my 1 year as minister, they're working very hard to see how they can change that mindset. But I would encourage everyone to read Robert's Donut Economics book, because I think the fundamental problem that we have is the two worlds that we have, right? One is the developed world, where, or rather the world of the 1%, where a lot of the ecological limits have been exhausted. They're living beyond their means, they are flying to and fro in their private jets every day or whatever, and so on and so forth. But then you have the rest of the world, not just the developing world, but many even in the developed world, the poorer segments of society, that are struggling to even, get their energy requirements met, water requirements met. And so that sense of balance is what is lost in the system today. Until we are able to address that, and it's something that we have been talking about, the world has been talking about for centuries. Until we are able to address that satisfactorily, then that limits the ambition. Right? And that goes back to, we're talking about the huge sums of money that's required. All that is limited. And I think, the example of Colombia is a good one, about some government that's trying to do the right thing, the developing world, that is being punished for it. And you can see a lot of other countries, the developed world, there are countries I don't want to mention that are keep lowering their ambitions when it comes to climate. And they don't get punished. Right? So whereas we are then being told that we should be more ambitious, and we do want to be more ambitious, but it is a challenge. We will definitely do all we can to push up our ambitions, but it needs, for the cliche for this will be a whole of world approach for us to overcome this.
Thank you so much, Minister. That is very inspiring. Just 2 days ago, we heard at Asian School of Business Bank there are 4 former deputy governors from Malaysia, India, Thailand, and Japan. They were talking about the same thing, about how the financial system is geared against small open economies, and it's very difficult for them to manage even as central bankers. So our final round of questions before we open the floor to questions from the audience is about just transition. One of the most important aspects of the next few years is what we can all collectively do to ensure a smooth and just transition. I think everybody who needed to read the mitigation memo has read it and understood it. But adaptation is something that we really need to focus our minds on. Aside from access to affordable and reliable sustainable energy, aside from ensuring jobs and skill sets are upgraded, what else do we really need to apply our minds to?
I think to the credit of the Egyptians, who actually put just transition high up on the agenda, was really important. And for those of you who don't realize, it was a big fight in Dubai to keep that program going. Because as far as the developed countries were concerned, you can just shut it down, and just transition is only about the energy transition in terms of workers. And that's all they were interested in. And so, to the credit of the group of sensitive in China, the Just Transition Work Program now is actually quite comprehensive. So I think what we need to do, and that includes Malaysia, and of course the other developing world, it's not just about the mitigation side of things, it's also adaptation. And particularly I think the global goal on adaptation was something that's really significant. Many people missed that. And I think that was really significant in terms of the outcome, where you actually have a recognition that you need to do a lot in terms of building the climate resilience, in terms of the water sector, in terms of food and agriculture, in terms of health, first time mention of health, and how you build the health resilience. And so even in terms of indigenous peoples and their role in culture and so on, ecosystems-based approaches, not just data-based, but ecosystem-based approaches to adaptation. And some of the targets there actually in terms of early warning system, all countries having to have a multi-hazard early warning system by 2027. And of course, the most critical outcome was that the extent to which developing countries can realize this global goal and adaptation will depend on the extent of financial resources. Very, very critical. I'm a lawyer, the minister is a lawyer. We know how all this is really important. So that was an important outcome. Why do I bring this up in the just transition? I think for any developing country, the less we do, in terms of where the world is heading, many people are even asking whether we can reach the limit of 1.5. Apparently we're already crossing thresholds very fast. So what happens is, look at the drought that's happening in the north of Peninsula. The rice farmers, the paddy fields are drying up. And then you have one day you have a lot of water, another day no water. Penang's dams are down, the water levels have gone. There's a huge water crisis happening, not to mention the pipes bursting and so on. So many of the states are actually grappling with all this. We are facing the impacts. So a just transition, which is based on our national circumstance, which has to prioritize a lot more adaptation, will have to also prioritize loss and damage. I think to be fair to this country, we have focused a lot on the energy transition. We have systems and ideas in place and policies in place, but we don't have enough on adaptation and in response to loss and damage. So I would actually prioritize this pretty high, and in the next NDC that we need to communicate, our nationally determined contribution next year, I do hope that it will be far more comprehensive, that you will also have a big chunk of what we can do domestically and what we can do with greater international support, and how adaptation will feature quite high, including loss and damage. So to answer the question, the just transition actually is a very important concept for us to articulate, to show that, as Charles was saying, it's not overnight that we can do this, because actually the climate lens provides a great opportunity for the Madani government to actually combine. I was really struck by your equity example. People don't know how to express. You expressed it beautifully, Minister, the 1% and the bottom of the 99%. That is addressing equity, so that the burden of the adjustment doesn't fall on the poor, but rather it has to be borne by the rich. And I think that should be our lens which guides all our policy making.
Thank you so much, Meena. I know Petronas has been investing in increasing its climate resilience.
I also want to give credit to NGOs such as the one Amina represents, but others also to really broadening the agenda around COP, because climate mitigation alone won't deliver what's required. And even the Paris Agreement in its preamble talks about climate action is kind of dependent on addressing sustainable development and poverty. So thank you very much for keeping those flames alive and bringing the real issues to the table, because it's a systems issue. You have to bring the people with you as well. And of course the energy transition around the world, we heard hundreds of billions required in Malaysia. Globally, it's trillions and trillions of dollars that will go into new infrastructure. There won't be any other investment spree like that during our lifetimes. So we have to make sure that those investments create better prospects, more opportunities for more people. It is absolutely adamant that that happens. Now in Petronas, we know we have a role to play. We don't have the answers. So what we did last year, together, we partnered up with PwC, and we ran a series of roundtables. And we convened over 40 different organizations, mainly from Malaysia, a few international guests as well, over 140 delegates or participants, really to discuss in great depth what does it mean for communities, workers, but also sort of more broadly, we also discussed human rights, and from Petronas' perspective, nature matters, biodiversity matters, as Mina mentioned, health is important. So for us, net zero carbon emissions also means nature-based solutions, biodiversity, and now we're also trying to inform ourselves a bit more what does sort of a just transition mean. Now, Mina, you were asking about national income. Also in Petronas, part of our net zero carbon emission pathway, we have a clear ambition for cleaner energy solutions. So we are investing in a number of new value chains to enable new growth, economic growth that is a departure from oil and gas, but using our core skills that we have developed over the years. So that there is a lot underway. We hear loud and clear where the world wants to go, and we certainly want to play our part, but it's all about collaboration and understanding the complexities. And if I may just one point about offsets, and I agree with you, Mina, that you can't offset your way out of climate emissions. But however, offsets are a very important way of actually funneling money into where it's needed in protecting and conserving nature, and Malaysia is particularly important. So it's something that we do support for the hardest to abate emissions, because there will always be some residual emissions. But I agree with you, it's not something that can be used for all emissions. However, for Malaysia in particular, it will be particularly important, and a shout out to Bursa Malaysia, who's been very prominent in promoting voluntary carbon markets as well.
Thank you so much. Minister, I think there's a concern, worry that the climate emergency is going to layer on even more inequities, inefficiencies on those that are already marginalized. What are the ministry's thoughts on this?
Just before that, just to say that for this year we will be submitting, we will be spearheading the preparation of the biennial transparency report. This will mean that our reporting is put to a more stringent level of reporting. So that also will drive a lot more positive changes, I believe, for the country. But going back to what you were mentioning just now, yeah, I truly agree is that because if you are just focusing on mitigation, I think it was the CEO who mentioned just now that our emissions, the share of the world is about 0.6, 0.7%. We have been focusing on addressing that, and we need to address that. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't, but which means that the rest of it, we are really dependent on the world, because if not, more than 99% of the other emissions are not addressed, then we will still be gone within the next century or so. But the next part is adaptation, where Malaysia is basically a maritime nation. We are a peninsula and we are the northern part of Borneo. And we know that if nothing is being done from an adaptation perspective, a lot of Malaysia will actually be underwater. And surprise, surprise, the people who will be most exposed will actually be the poorest, right? Not just that, but at the same time, imagine one of the world's biggest pork clam suddenly underwater. What will happen to? I think it's okay if there's one part of if the party in Kedah is not producing, but we know that we depend on imports, right? So if pork clam is closed down, then we will suffer greatly. A lot of power plants are built near the coast because they need there to land the gas and everything is built near our coastlines. So they will also disappear overnight when the seawater rises. So I think that is where adaptation is key, and that's why we are now preparing our national adaptation plan. But it also provides room for government, not just the federal government, but state governments and local governments to address it at a local level, right? Things like dealing with urban heat island, things like dealing with sea level rise, floodplains and whatnot. That can be done at a local level. I would like to credit the Penang state government. They have received a fund of 10 million US dollars from the adaptation fund to prepare their own plan. And I think they're working with Think City on that. So, and I think this is where it's crucial because the national adaptation plan will be very broad. We need to zoom in at the local level, get the buy-in from the local government and the state governments to also address this. This will be a major issue. Last year was the world's hottest year, and we can feel it definitely. And actually, there was a study that's done where the difference between Kampung Baru in KL, in the shadows of KLCC, and the Orang Asli Department Office in Gombak, not a big distance, can go, I think, 6-7 degrees Celsius because of the urban heat island effect. And within KL, between KLCC, because you have a park, and the likes of Pudu and Bukit Bintang, you can also see a difference of 2 degrees Celsius where KLCC is actually lower in temperature. So these are things that we need to have in mind. These are things that we never thought of before. And we used to think that, oh, if it's hot in Malaysia, we can deal with it. But this is reaching a level of heat that we've had deaths last year from heat strokes in Malaysia. So I think adaptation is definitely key. And if we don't address it, there was this famous saying that Lee Kuan Yew said that the best invention for the tropics was the aircon because it improved the productivity of people in the tropics. So that is where the differential happens, because if you do not have access to cooling facilities and whatnot, things are very hot. The difference between the poor and the rest of society is so big that you can see immediate impact there.
Thank you so much, Minister. Questions from the floor. We're going to ask everyone, please give your name, where you're from, ask your questions succinctly. We'll take all questions and then we will hear from the panelists. You need to speak quickly because I've just been told we've got 5 minutes left. Okay, just go straight out to the mic.
Hi, sweet. Give me the mic.
Hi. Hi.
Okay, very quickly, Shalom from Kasnar Research Institute. I really welcome the Minister's embrace of climate finance and adaptation. And I want to ask, I think we need to get down to some of the difficult realities of climate finance. Most of climate finance is profit seeking. You want a return. Right? And there's a tension between our long-term transition plans in the letter. I think it says that 59% of our near-term investments needed for energy transition are not going to be profitable or even loss-making, right? But then 61% of climate finance is in the form of debt, 34% is in the form of equity, 25% is in the form of grants, and maybe only about 80% is concession in the last 10 years. So there's great tension between debt sustainability and our climate ambitions. Right? One MDB, about 42 billion debt, but energy transition, I think is still 640 billion, right? And these kind of concerns, I was in a workshop last year with climate finance negotiators from the Group of 77, and debt sustainability for climate transition, big concern for development. So I would like to ask, how is Malaysia going to prepare and ask a clear figure for the new collective quantified goal agenda we embarked on this year, especially since for adaptation, you don't even have a figure for how much it will cost to state or plan, or the rest of the cost of the world. Right? And that leads again to $1 trillion. So, please.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Aru. I'm from the climate justice and feminist organization called Climate Action Malaysia. I was at COP28 with the Indigenous Peoples Caucus and the Women and Gender constituency. We, the young people, feminist, indigenous peoples, do not agree that COP28 was inclusive. It was the most expensive COP. It was hard for young people to access. And it was a place, a breeding ground for false solution and profit-driven and fossil fuel negotiations. Number two, I wish to see more Malaysian negotiators and ministers to be outspoken about holding global north and rich countries accountable in terms of climate finance, not just about the war and the genocide that is happening in Gaza, but also that we deserve these climate fundings, and we need to hold them accountable. And I would like to ask YB about where are we in terms of gender in climate negotiations? Because the ILO played a big role during the just energy transition discussions, and I did not see a lot of our Malaysian negotiators active in that. So I would like to see where we are